Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing yet another weight cut review video. Today we're going to be looking at Islam Makhachev before his UFC fight night against Thiago Moises. Islam had a very dominant win, very impressive win, and I think it was just a day after he fought that he uploaded this video detailing his weight cut. And I have had a lot of people send it to me and a lot of people reach out asking for a review, so I'm going to do that. He did upload it through Khabib's channel, so I've gotten that video, and I think it'll be very interesting. If you guys have seen my Khabib weight cut video, I'm interested to see if the processes are pretty similar, given that Islam, they're in the same weight division, or Khabib used to compete in this weight division, but Islam is a much smaller guy than Khabib, and so it'd be interesting to see what processes they use and if they alter anything or they kind of go through a similar process of what they put Khabib through. So let's just get started.
I feel not so good, but it's okay.
I feel not so good. Fair enough. Like, you're never going to feel great when you're putting your body through this, but you know, there's a better way to do it than what most people are currently doing it.
I have 4 more kilos.
So he just said that he has 4 more kilos. So let's pause it there. And I did do some quick maths about this. So if he's got 4 more kilos, that means he's about 74.7 kilos. And that will sit him about 5.1% outside of his contracted fight weight, which is 70.7 kilos or 156 pounds. So when it gets to this point of the process, what you're aiming to have to cut is a maximum of 5% water weight. And we've spoken about that time and time again. We want to do that because within the confines of the UFC weigh-ins, when you have the recovery period and the rehydration period, it's about 36 hours. If you're doing anything more than 5% body weight during this phase here, we can't be that confident that we're getting all the fluid back into your body and into all the compartments that we need it to be for you to go into that fight fully hydrated. And we've spoken about the consequences of doing any of that dehydrated. So I'm assuming here that he's done pretty well. Like if he's getting to this point, he's got 5% to go. That's pretty good. That's what we aim to get our guys to. Obviously, this video started from the water cut, so we haven't had a chance to see what he's doing during the fight week. And I spoke about this on the Khabib video, that even, you know, I've been exposed to their kind of nutrition system, and it's a bit different to say what I would do and what other teams around the world do. And, you know, during that fight week, you're looking to manipulate 3 different nutrients: carbohydrates, fiber, and sodium. And by manipulating them in the body, you're going to be manipulating water weight in the body. So you are strategically dehydrating all week by removing those nutrients in the body, but then you're going to get to this point where you've got to do this water cut and then further dehydrate the body. So it's really important that you do have a really well planned out acute weight loss strategy for those, you know, 4 to 5 days during fight week to bring you to this point, and then get you to this point where you can safely bring this down. And without that information, it's kind of hard, but I have seen that they do some funny things, the Dagestanis, where they won't necessarily do a water load. They'll do a water taper, which can be really dangerous when you, and a water taper is when you don't say water load. Like what we do is increase your habitual water intake by 25 or 50% for a few days and then bring it down, and then 12 hours before you get in the bath or start this process, cut it out. They cut it out for days on end, and so they're even more dehydrated when they get to this point. They'll often cut out carbohydrates, you know, a couple weeks earlier before they get to this point. So again, we don't know what's happening. I'm going to assume that the fight week was probably pretty tough from what I've seen of what these guys do in fight week, and Islam's probably going into this quite depleted and probably a bit more dehydrated than what he should be, but let's see what happens.
2 more training, and that's it. We're gonna train now.
So he's just saying that he's going to train at night and then train again in the morning to get the weight cut, to split it up in 2, which is very common. We'll see how he's going to do this as well. It looks like he's going to exercise in some capacity.
Training like 2 hours, cut 1.5 to 2.
The guy at the back is like moving the chin up bar. I hope he's not doing chin ups. Okay, so he's hitting pads. So this is all right for the night before. Like, I'll pause it here and I'll talk about this because it's a point to make. And we do this with our guys where they'll get like a light sweat on just by hitting pads or moving around, because they do that every night during the fight week, but it's never intense. Like, I've spoken about this so many times, why I don't necessarily like exercising when doing these weight cut, and it's called active dehydration. I prefer these passive dehydration methods where you're either in a bathtub where you're controlling the bath water and the temperature of the air around the guys, or you're in, say, a portable sauna, which is way better than I think than an infrared sauna. You can control the temperature of the portable sauna and also control the temperature of the room, and be able to use cooling strategies with these guys. But when you're doing these active processes, you've got to think the body is heating up because muscles are contracting to do activity, and that contraction is creating heat, and that's raising this core body temperature to a point which is inducing the sweat response, and then the sweat response kicks in and you start sweating and lose weight through the water, obviously. When you're doing that though, your muscles are contracting and they're looking for a fuel source to fuel that contraction and fuel that activity. But you think about all the things that they've done in the 4 to 5 days leading up to this, he's probably cut out carbohydrates that time, and like I said earlier, probably a lot longer. So any activity where your heart rate's getting elevated or the intensity is going up, your body's going to be looking for that glycogen and that glucose to do that activity, and it's going to be really difficult to do that, just mentally straining. Your body's going to fatigue and feel terrible because it's looking for that fuel source but just not having it. And like, it's definitely going to be running off some fats, and of course, but it's just not going to have the fuel source that it wants. And I'm hoping as we watch this, they keep the intensity down as low as possible. But the thing is, when you go into this part of the weight cut, even if you keep the intensity low, because you're so fluid volume depleted, which means you've lost fluid in your blood, your cardiovascular system has more stress on it. So even when you do these little activities and movements, because you're fluid volume depleted, your cardiovascular system has to work harder. Your body's going to correct and try to keep everything in balance and increase your heart rate, increase your blood pressure. So you're going to be pushing up to those intensities where your body's going to be looking for those other fuel sources. So that's why I'm not a big fan of doing this, active dehydration. I think, yes, you'll heat the body up and you'll get that sweat response, but you're going to be doing it in a way that is way more stressful. One, on your muscular system because you don't have the fuel to support it, and then two, on your cardiovascular system, which is trying to keep up with this activity. He seems to be going pretty light, which is good.
Like Thursday, always like when you cut like afternoon, like nighttime, this is easy. But when you think about Friday morning, you're gonna cut. This is make this happen.
So Khabib's saying that
Like just
it's a lot easier the night before than what it is in the morning. And I'll pause it here and talk about that because that's a good point to make. And it's a good strategy that as a practitioner, you need to think about and consider, because you do have the option, right? These guys aren't weighing in till 9 to 11 is the UFC weigh-in time. And you've got to weigh up these options. Okay, do I cut weight the night before and then do a bit in the morning? Or do I do it all at the night before? Or do I do it all in the morning? And what you're weighing up is, at least in my eyes, is what is the way of least resistance? What is the way that you're going to do that puts the least amount of stress on the body? What you're banking on though is getting enough data on your athlete to know if you're going to get an overnight float. And what I say by an overnight float is that when they go to bed nighttime here, a lot of people will lose weight overnight because your body's perspiring, your body's still metabolizing, you're breathing out water in your breath. So if you get a good 8-hour sleep, good deep sleep, you can often wake up a kilo and a half lighter, and we call that an overnight float. So an option for these guys, say when they're cutting whatever he's cutting, Islam's cutting 4.3 kilos in this, there's an option that he could maybe float 1.5 kilos, and that's a easy or free weight loss that you get just from sleeping. So you can kind of toss it up and go, okay, do you bank on just getting that good overnight sleep and then losing that 1.5 kilos and having just 2.8 kilos, whatever it is, to do in the morning? The issue that you run with that is that there's two issues. They'll still be dehydrated though, because they're going to be dehydrating throughout that nighttime, but they will feel better if they don't do anything the night before. But you're banking a lot on that overnight float. And if you don't get that overnight float, now you run the risk that you've got too much weight to do in too short a period of time. And like everything with weight cutting, most of the potential dangers come from rushing this process or putting the body under too much stress in too quick a time. And when you're doing this process, yes, the body has an insane capacity to move fluid inside and out of compartments, and you can really push, quite comfortably 5, 6, 7, 8% of fluid out of a person. But you need to do it in such a controlled way. It's such a slow, methodical way, and you can't be putting too much stress. You can't be overheating the body. You can't be doing this really rapidly and moving this body and not allowing it to reacclimate. And you can't have too much stress on the cardiovascular system, because that's where all these terrible issues are going to come. And that's the risk you run if you go with and bank on the overnight float and you don't get it. So a lot of people just go, stuff that. What we're going to do is we're going to start at the night time. We're going to get a good chunk off there, and then we're going to presume in the morning. And that's kind of what Khabib's talking about here, is that nighttime, yeah, it's a bit easier because you're coming off that fight week, probably had food that day and like probably only cut water a few hours ago, and then you feel good, get a good chunk of it out, but then you just go to sleep. And a lot of people do not sleep after they do this first session. They're tossing and turning, they're rumbling around in bed, and they're just staying up all night, and then they get up in the morning, barely slept, and they've got to go back already at peak dehydration and then dehydrate even further. So that's what Khabib's talking about.
Tomorrow morning, because tomorrow morning you have to cut like 4 pounds. Always like this.
So he's running. Like again, like I'm saying, I'm not a big fan of this exercise, but at least here he's like doing a light run and then he's walking. So I'm hoping that he's just keeping this as low intensity as possible. I would hope that they're wearing like a heart rate monitor as well to track where he's at.
What are you doing right now? What do you have left?
Then he's going over to the bike. And again, if you're doing any of this, you've got to have people around you, because at any point you're at risk of passing out because your fluid volume depleted. You've got to have people around you to catch you.
And tomorrow
He's sweating well, which is really good, so I'm assuming that he's got a good amount of fluid in there. But again, like I was saying, it's the muscle contraction that's causing the heat, that's causing the sweat. So that's a lot of unnecessary suffering.
3-minute run, 5-minute walk, and 3 rounds. Work with backs, mitts, and now he put towel on him, and he's gonna lay
So
down.
Khabib's just explaining that the process that they're doing, and they exercise a lot and they go on the towel. And even the towels aren't going to be that efficient, because again, the heat is being generated by the muscles that are increasing that core body temperature, and they're probably not getting that core body temperature high enough where when you're in those wraps and your body's cooling down, where you're going to like have a sustained sweat. He'd probably sweat a couple minutes in those towels, and it'd just be a natural cooling off period. So, but
when we eat,
again, like this is again intricacies of why I don't like doing this exercising. They've got a portable sauna there. I would just be using that portable
You do
sauna.
everything like exactly what he do, like on his last time when he cut weight,
So Khabib's saying that they have a very strict like protocol of what they do leading up, and again, you can have a very strict protocol. It doesn't mean that it's the best protocol or it's working well. Again, they're making weight and they're doing that fine, and we haven't seen what their fight week strategies are, but again, from what I'm seeing, these exercise heavy weight cuts are probably not the best, and I would not be recommending them.
How do you feel tonight?
good, feel good.
Cuts going.
That's interesting. I'm going to pause that there, and that's a comment Islam just made about after the weigh-ins he's going to eat everything. And it's interesting because when people get to a point of dehydration, they don't talk about food. The food is the last thing on their mind. What they want is fluids. And anyone that does any type of sweating or dehydration, like imagine just training at nighttime and then not rehydrating and then waking up in the morning. First thing in your mind is going to be fluids. That's interesting. So maybe he's not as dehydrated as what we think, or maybe he just really likes food. Who knows?
Cut going is good. I have power, feel great.
It also makes me think, and I'll pause again, that they've probably been really, really restrictive, like quite restrictive in their fight camp. If food is the first thing, is like, I can just have a burger, or I can just have something else, and which all those foods are fine, in my opinion, in the fight camp, especially when you're prepping the body for that fight week, because you want to make sure that you're full of carbohydrates, you're full of fiber, you're full of salt before you start this process. So when you do the fight week process, all of the nutrients you're trying to manipulate are already in the body, and you can manipulate it, and you're not pulling away from nothing, which may be the case here with Islam.
A lot of brothers here give me good energy. That's why I'm ready.
He's telling us he feels great. His words are saying that, but his face is telling another story. But these guys, the Dagestani wrestlers, they're just so mentally tough. So 5:30 in the morning, so let's see. He's probably going to wake up and check weight, I would imagine.
2.5 kilos to cut. Now it's 6 o'clock in the morning. Got a couple of hours. We're going to cut this weight down.
Okay, we'll just pause it there. Ali, his manager, just said that they have 2.5 kilos to cut. So if he has 2.5 kilos to cut, then that's probably, let's dissect that a little, because Islam and Khabib before were saying that he only had about 1.5 to 2 kilos to cut. So me hearing that means that he's probably started this whole process heavier than what he was letting on when he told us. So he probably wasn't 74.7. If he cut, say, 2.3 kilos last night and then he's got 2.5 kilos to do this morning, then that means he started this process about 75.5. The reason I'm saying that is that now we've moved out of this spot from where it was just 5%, like 5.1%, which is a alright, like it's an alright amount to do. Now we've moved on to a 6% weight cut where you're starting to creep. Okay, this is getting a bit too much, and you've got to be really, really careful with how you move that in and out of the body and how you put it back in. And the thing is, this is why it's so important, and why I think these guys could be doing this much more intelligently and not just doing it through the exercise, is that you're moving into those dangerous zones, and you've got to be so careful. Like, why would you put so much extra stress on the body when you're already pushing the limits? So let's see what he does this morning.
And here we go, baby.
He looks lean on that scale, like he definitely looks really sucked out. So I'd assume I'm correct in that, and that he started at a higher weight than what he said, and he's probably doing 6%. Again, I'll pause again and just make this note that this all depends on what he did leading up to this point as well. Like, he might have already been depleted going into his fight week, ignored all of the UFC Performance Institute nutrition team and not taken on any of their advice, because they would have been offering to help. And I know these guys are very secular in their thinking and secular in their approach, which is whatever, it is what it is. It's just, he's probably not lost that much weight during the fight week and then had quite a bit to lose during this bit, or he's lost like maybe 2-3% by just, you know, not eating very much at all. So he's probably really, really feeling it at this stage. And he looks like he's feeling it, like he looks really drawn out. So they're layering up, putting on a sauna suit, t-shirt. It's good that he's got a good team around him. Like, I always talk about that. Like, I might not agree with a lot of these methods, but he's got a good support group around him. And if anything was to happen, he's got a lot of people that could go find other people who could get there fast and help him out, which is a really good thing. You never want to be doing this alone, or, you know, with one other person who really doesn't have any clue what's going on. He's really stacking on the layers here.
I had 2.5.
It's illegal. DC, call DC. Call police.
I don't know what Khabib's doing with that. Oh, he's saying something about DC. So he's just swirling, spitting, so he's obviously feeling very pasty, very dry. Oh no, he's putting on the gloves again. No, don't do that. I'll pause it here, and again, I'm going to reiterate this point. I can't understand what this guy's saying, so I'll just let it play, actually. They're hitting pads, and again, his body has no fuel. He'd be so depleted right now. Unnecessary stress. His body's looking for that fuel, that energy to be able to fuel this activity, but he's just not going to have it. And look, he's sweating like he's on the treadmill. He's sweating, but he's doing that by contracting these muscles. It'd be like running a car with no fuel, or putting vegetable oil in a car. Like, imagine the damage that would be doing in that car. That's what's going on in his body. He could just be sitting in a bath where he's controlling the temperature of the bath. I'll pause it here and go over this. He could be sitting in a bath where he's sitting in a, not even a hot bath, a warm bath where they're controlling the temperature of the bath water, the temperature of the room that he's in. He could be in that portable sauna where you've got different settings where you can go up and down, and you just need to put it just above that core body temperature. You just need to heat up just above that core body temperature, and that's going to induce the sweat response. And the difference with using that as a tactic is that you're not doing the muscle contraction and creating heat through effort and exerting physical energy out to do that. You're just sitting there, and yes, in both occasions you're going to make weight and you're going to get that weight off, but one requires a lot of unnecessary stress and energy output in the body, and the other one is much more tightly controlled, a lot more variables you can control, and a lot more easier on the body. Same result, two different ways to get there. But the thing is, look at him, he's just mentally tough. He's just toughing it out. He's just, like, all fighters are very mentally tough, and that's almost to their detriment with this. So they'll just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Like, again, I'll give him credit. They've got people around him. He's always supervised. That's really good. Like, see how he's like, he's grabbing stuff and he's getting obviously lightheaded. But look, you can see how on this bike, like, he does not look good. He's in struggle street. Really bad struggle street. And that's because he's doing this physical exertion and he's putting out energy from a fuel source he does not have. It's just unnecessary. I'll pause it there for that comment that Ali just made as well. So you want to be a fighter. And this is a big issue I find, and ranting coming here, because this does trigger me a little bit, is that so you want to be a fighter, and they're almost glorifying this weight cutting process. And the thing is that it doesn't need to be glorified. In our part of the world, Australia and New Zealand, I'm very, very fortunate that I've got athletes like Israel Adesanya, Alexander Volkanovski, Brad Riddell, Dan Hooker, Kai Car-France, all these very high level athletes that take their weight cutting very seriously. They take their nutrition very seriously. They manage their weight correctly. And they listen to us enough to know and become better educated that you don't need to put yourself through this. You don't need to do this. This is a completely unnecessary process that has no benefit to your performance and complete decrements to your health. And they know that, and they openly preach it to people. And yeah, we do move weight and we do cut weight, but we do it in a very controlled, methodical, scientific manner. And we do it by taking the path of least resistance. And I always encourage them, and I thank them so much because they do a great job at promoting this as well, as that not promoting this toxic weight cutting culture where it's almost like beat your chest, like, look how tough I am by how much weight I'm cutting, and look how much I'm suffering, look how much I'm going through and how much I've earned this. And that's a very archaic and very outdated model, and it's something that we should not be putting people in a position to idolize. Like, we should not be showing Islam going through this and then having someone saying, oh, so you want to be a fighter, you've got to go through this as well. Because young kids are going to watch this and go, oh, okay, so this is what I've got to do to be a fighter like Islam Makhachev. Like, no, that's not what we were saying. Like, look at Israel, look at Alex, look at Brad, look at all these other guys, look at Dan Hooker, these guys that are at the top end of their sport. They don't do this. They don't put themselves through this. And if we have to go through this process, we're doing it in a way easier way. That's way less harmful for your body, and it's so much less stressful on your heart and your cardiovascular system. We want to be promoting those guys and saying this extreme, unnecessary suffering way to cut weight is not tough. That's not the way you want to be as a fighter. You want to be focusing on being a great athlete in the octagon. Throw all this away. So I really don't like that sentiment of, oh, so you want to be a fighter, you got to suffer and go through this. So that's my little rant over. So even here, like, looking at this, he's suffering big time. What they could be doing is using cooling strategies. Like, he's obviously overheating. His body's already raised his temperature. He's going to keep sweating. Using ice cubes around his head here, you know, ice with a cloth and just patting down parts of his body. It's not going to bring his core body temperature right down to the point he stops sweating, but it's going to stop it going up and level it out. So again, reducing the amount of unnecessary suffering he's in. Look, he's going in a portable sauna. In all of that, his body's going to be so hot. Get the guy some ice to put on his head. His body's got a constant source of heat around here. If you put that ice around his head, it's going to have huge psychological benefits, and it's going to stop that body or the rate of overheating. And they do this massage. They did this in the Khabib video, I think, as well. What they're doing with this massage is essentially like cognitive dissonance. Like, they're trying to distract them from, okay, you're feeling like this, so I'm going to massage your head and focus on this. But I would be using cooling strategies, because yes, you get the cognitive dissonance from it and the psychological benefit, and it does something physiologically beneficial as well, stopping the overheating. Like, he looks cooked at this stage. He looks not good at all. Like, he's really pushing him, and I think we're right in saying that he's cut a lot more weight than what we've said, but this is also an outcome of how he's cut this weight by doing this exercise. Like, he should have been using that portable sauna the whole way through. Again, I'll credit him. There's lots of people around him, lots of support. He's doing fairly minimal movement. Oh, they gave him an ice cube there, which is really good. Let him suck on that, but he should be cooling his body, let him cool down. I think they're about to go check weight. See, good, again, assisting him up. We've spoken about that so many times before. Orthostatic hypertension, never ever stand up fast when your fluid volume depleted. And
Ooh.
he's on weight, so he's made weight. And it is always a big moment like that with the guys when they make weight. But again, it's like that culture, like, yes, you made weight and you did the suffering to get through it. It's like, okay, yes, it's not all about making weight though. Like, you've got to go fight the next night. So why don't we just take out all the suffering from this weight making process and all the effort that you put into making weight, and put it into focusing on the fight.
Very excited. Look, everything is ready.
See, this is the thing. I don't think too much else happens in this video,
couple
but
minutes before to go.
this is something that I disagree with these videos, is that they're trying to highlight and make it seem like for you to be a fighter at this level or this caliber, this is what you have to go through to do it. And that's not the case at all. Like, if you watch our videos, what we do with our guys, like, it's a completely different scenario. Like, it's short, it's sharp, it's not at all that stressful on their body. They're all in good spirits. They don't look that terrible either. And like, the thing is, I say to my guys, if you get them on the scales and they look terrible and they feel terrible, we didn't do our job right. Like, that we should be able to plan through that whole fight camp, whole fight week phase, just so when we get to that point that they don't have to put themselves through that suffering. And I think like some of the major points here is that through this video is that we don't know what they did in that fight week. I'm going to assume that they didn't use the UFC Performance Institute, because I know they travel with their own nutritionist and he does a lot of interesting things to go in there. But I'm hoping that they would listen to Clint and Charles and their team and really start taking on that information and hopefully taking on board that to help alleviate some of the damage that they're doing during this week. The second thing is that I'm not really convinced on the weights that they're giving us. From what he looked like, he was probably a lot heavier. I would say he was about 75.5, so he did nearly 5 kilos, about 4.8 kilos. That requires some much more intelligent methods, and I would not be using exercise or active dehydration to get nearly 5 kilos off someone. You would be using those passive dehydration methods. You would be using heat acclimation during the fight camp to make sure that his body is physiologically as good as it can be at sweating, and then psychologically that he's prepared with that process and knows every step of the way, and everyone in the team knows because you've done it every week and drilled it throughout the fight camp. So, but again, we don't know if those numbers are accurate. And I think the main takeaway from this, and it's very similar to the Khabib video, is that there's just so much unnecessary stress being put on the body during this process. Like, you just absolutely do not need to be exercising and putting that unnecessary stress on your cardiovascular system. Your cardiovascular system is already fluid volume depleted, so the viscosity of the blood is compromised. The ability to perfuse oxygen and nutrients to your organs is already compromised. And the fact that he's doing this in that 6% range, you've got to be so much more dialed in. And I would hope that anyone that watches this video doesn't watch it and then think, oh yeah, Islam, like, that's the way I'm going to do it as well. What I hope you take away from this video is that, no, that's not the best way to do it. And there are better ways to do it. And you should be talking to a professional and doing all these other things outside of camp, your body assessments, getting put in the right weight category, getting a really good, healthy, balanced nutrition meal where you can fuel your body, make sure you're not in low energy availability, make sure that you have a good weight descent plan where you're not dying throughout your fight camp, make sure you're fueling your body up right up until that fight week and prepping your body and having all the nutrients in there that you're going to manipulate that fight week, and then slowly moving fluid day by day by reducing those nutrients, the carbohydrates, fiber, and sodium, taking it out. And then when we get to this water cut phase, never doing more than 5% and having a really structured, well thought out, taking the path of least resistance strategy to get that water, get them to the point where they make the weight and then they go and rehydrate, put it back in, refuel with familiar foods that you've used all fight camp, let them go in the cage, let them do what they love, and let them be healthy and go home to their family as healthy as possible. I know in this, at least he's rehydrating with the UFC PI, so he's got good rehydration. He's probably eating their meals as well, which is great. So you can at least be confident that he's rehydrating well and he's reloading well. But again, lots of things I would improve on that. Like, again, good support from his team. I really, really like that. And a couple of good things there, but ultimately same outcome as with Khabib's videos. Like, you can't question the success of these guys, and this is the thing with this whole thing. You watch this and then they go out and win, and so people will think, okay, that's how you got to do it. Do not think like that. None of our guys do it like this. Most teams in the world do not do it like this. If you're a young fighter and watching, there are better ways to do it than this. Don't put yourself through this. Be more intelligent. Look after yourself. look after your body, work with a professional, do this the right way. Make sure you can do this for 10 years longer than what you would have been able to do if you do it this way. So look after yourself out there. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in again and watching that. If I've said things in there that you agree with or disagree with, or you want to discuss more, feel free to hit me in the comments and we can discuss there. Shoot me a message on social media, shoot me an email, whatever you want. Let's discuss, let's go over this. I think it's really important we bring light to these issues and we talk to get more positive weight cut culture out there and teach the younger generation that there is a better way to do it. If there's other videos you guys want me to review or talk about on the channel, again, just shoot me a message. But thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I'll see you guys next time.